A society's economy is its system for delivering goods and services to its citizens. We use a slightly altered view as providing the means to perform the tasks or functions the citizens require. For example, do you want to own a lawnmower or have your lawn mowed? We will see that from this perspective, we can have an efficient economy in which every person, even the wealthiest, has a better quality of life than today, and that at minimum, that would be better than that of a well-to-do retired person today. These efficiencies would also greatly diminish all pollutants, including greenhouse gas emissions. The efficiencies exploit Net's ability to move people and goods efficiently and rapidly. For goods pickups and deliveries within a neighborhood, as shown here in real time, delivery times would be under a minute, with a cost of about 1/10 of a cent. Longer deliveries would largely be performed by WAN vehicles, operating like today's transit buses, but only stopping to pick up or drop off Net's boxes containing the goods. Deliveries from anywhere in a city would still cost under a cent and take less than a minute per kilometer from request to delivery. Even faster deliveries would be available, but at a multi-cent cost. That and the corresponding costs and times for moving people are why we refer to this nets-based efficient economic model as a basis for change. Our current economic system promotes the production and distribution of far more household capital goods than are needed to provide the tasks they are used for. It also requires too many human and other resources, including non-household capital goods, during the production and distribution of the goods. The production and purchase points are often widely separated both in space and time, leading to some of the excessive count and resource issues. It also leads to large amounts of disposable, or at best recyclable, packaging that forms much of today's waste. The goods are often of poor quality, and many are even designed to be discarded rather than repaired. We describe here how a basis for change economy addresses all those issues. Capital goods are used to perform tasks, and unless broken, remain the same after each use, with the possible exception of a small amount of wear. A basis for change economy is built around household owner-operated services that perform many tasks and per-use rentals of most capital goods that cannot be performed by those tasks. This reduces the number of capital goods required for most tasks by more than 10 to 1. That low demand for capital equipment that is used by the services, or rental goods, is satisfied by local, on-demand, mostly automated production services. The materials and commodity components used for goods production may be produced remotely by larger facilities, but for those, the distribution space and time is not an issue. Being local and on-demand eliminates the overproduction and non-production costs of the long global supply chains. Those include the marketing, sales, accounting, and other non-production related departments of all the entities involved in producing the goods and getting them to their customers. The costs of those functions often exceed 5 times what it costs to produce the goods. One major such entity is the packaging that each good is wrapped in to pass through the supply chain. With all shipments done in Net's reusable boxes, and all but commodity materials and component production being local, there is no need for disposable packaging and associated waste. Non-capital household goods are consumables like food, beverages, personal grooming items like soaps and shampoos, paper products, drugs, and energy. As with the capital goods, a basis for change economy would emphasize local production of such items as far as possible. For example, most plant food products would be produced in backyard greenhouses. We deal with food production in a separate video. However, as with the capital goods, the costs customers pay for these items are dominated by non-production costs, including packaging. And as with the capital goods, the on-demand local production with low-cost nets-based distribution largely eliminates those costs. Where production is separated from demand, in space or time, Basis for Change uses a network of fully automated household-based dispensing services to provide the required buffering. The cost of that buffering would add less than 1 cent to the cost of most items. Basis for Change services would mostly be household owner-operator services. These would operate out of repurposed household spaces, typically redundant cuts garages, or purpose-built spaces like backyard greenhouses. There are 5 main categories of Basis for Change household owner-operated services: dispensing, transformation, assembly, healthcare, and capital goods owners. The basis for change services that would not be household owner operated would be specialized site providers, capital goods material or component producers, and animal or tree crop food producers, and all services involved in the construction and renovation of residential spaces. We discuss housing and food production topics in separate videos. Designs for use by transforming and assembly services to provide goods would be created by individuals or ad hoc groups for sale online. We refer to these collectively as production services. Capital goods cleaning and repair services are examples of transformation services that are not production ones. Basis for change would also have infrastructure services of various types. These would include a transportation service for moving people and goods, a service for renewably generating electricity, storing it and distributing it to all services and households, and a service for storing and communicating information. NETS provides the transportation of people and goods, with the exception of clean or dirty water. Its NETS-E and NETS-I subsystems provide all but the last-mile elements of the electricity and information distribution networks. Within settlements and many rural locations, those last-mile distribution networks exist today. NETS provides the function of moving people and goods between these services. This can occur anytime 24/7. Land legs would cost about 1/10 of a cent to move a NETS box, which may contain multiple objects. Land legs within settlements would take less than 1 minute. Land legs would cost less than 1/10 of a cent per kilometer and require less than a minute per kilometer within settlements. The main requirements for longer shipments would be for materials or components used by production services and food items not produced locally. Those would primarily be animal products and tree crops. Per-use rentals of capital goods are implemented by having a capital goods owner turn the goods over to the dispensing services to allow any household to rent it. While some capital goods may be owned by households for their exclusive use, that would be rare. When made available for renting, we will show that the capital cost of the goods would be rapidly recovered, some profit may be made, and there would be the environmental benefits of having far fewer capital goods produced. There are three primary motivations for this model versus today's system. Today, the cost to produce goods, both capital and consumables, is often 20% or less than what purchasers of those goods pay. Corporate entities have many departments performing activities not performing the production, shipping, dispensing, or personal service activities of the entity. These include marketing, sales, accounting, finance, administration, and human resources. None of those activities are required by the Basis for Change model. The global supply chain also has multiple such entities involved in getting materials and components to producers and getting the goods from the producers into the hands of customers to use for capital goods or consume for household consumables. Each entity in these networks adds its own profits to the cost the ultimate customer pays. Basis for Change capital goods owners would commission capital goods production services to produce the goods on demand from designs they create or obtain from goods designers and potentially adjust. The produced goods are shipped directly to the capital goods owner, where production is separated from demand in space or time, as with producing food. Household owner-operated dispensing services provide the required buffering. The cost of that buffering would add less than 1 cent to the cost of most items. In both cases, the cost the purchaser pays would always be very close to the production cost of the good. The cost of entry to become a service provider is largely just the purchase of the appropriate capital equipment, a minor renovation of the residence to allow access to the equipment from land loops, and any potential certification for any labor the service would provide. That would largely be limited to personal care services. The low cost of entry would produce a competitive market to control the profits Basis for Change services would charge. The other benefit of the household owner-operator service model is that it allows services to be located as close to their customers as appropriate to provide the desired response times for the tasks they perform. That occurs without requiring any new buildings for the services. Basis for Change services would use a fee model divided into 4 parts. A capital cost repayment fee, which we call the CCRF, to recover the costs of any capital goods they purchase. A non-capital cost recovery fee, a waste handling fee, and a profit. The non-capital cost fee would cover any labor they perform electricity they consume, or other input they consume, transform, or embed in any output they produce. The fee for capital goods owners, providing their goods for per-use rental, would only have the CCRF and their profits. We will describe the CCRF model in the context of rentals. We will use C to denote the cost the owner paid to acquire the object. The CCRF varies according to how many times the object is being rented. CCRF at N would equal C over N. That C over N would be split equally among all N prior renters as a rebate. This ensures that all renters would have paid the same C over N amount after rebates for their rental. The object owner would treat themselves as the first M renters. This means that after rental N, the rebates to the owner would have accumulated to repay them all but CM over N. As an example, if the owner chooses M equals 10, after 100 and 1,000 rentals, the owner would have received 90% and 99% of C, respectively, in rebates. This chart shows the cost each renter would have paid and the owner capital cost outstanding, or CCO, per $100 of C. In this chart, we have assumed an owner's profit model that starts at 0 for rental 11, or M plus 1, and grows at a rate of 0.02% with each rental. We have also assumed rental service costs and profits and nets fees all to be 1/10 of 1 cent per rental. Even though the first renter had paid a $9.09 fee at the time, after 1,000 rentals, they would have received a total rebate of $8.99. Their net cost would be the same as that of the most recent renter. The rebates would still be accumulating and available to each new renter for as long as the object lasts. Note also that with the profit model used for this chart, the owner's profits have already exceeded their capital cost outstanding by the 340th rental. From that point on, their purchase is actually making them money. That would be on top of any other owner benefit like free rentals. This rental model means that all renters and the owner benefit from more durable goods. Each renter is also motivated to minimize the wear they put on the object to extend its life. The parameter M was introduced into the model to offset to some degree the high initial rental costs. While those would be repaid over time, they could be a drawback for early customers. For non-rental services, both the capital cost and the number of tasks the equipment performed in its lifetime would be much higher than the rental objects. In those cases, M would be adjusted accordingly, but the same principles would apply. The CCRF model ensures fair rental fees for all renters and the object owner. The on-demand local production ensures purchase costs very close to what it costs to build the object. As we noted, that would generally be less than 20% of the highly burdened costs to purchase the object today. The temporal sharing provided by renting decreases the number of objects that are needed relative to an object used exclusively by the purchaser. The reduction is the ratio of the average number of rentals per exclusive use. Assume a person wears one shirt, one pair of pants, 2 socks, and some underwear each day. This image would be the typical clothing stock for a couple. A person would use a couple of dishes, a cup, and a few cutlery items per meal. These cupboards and drawers reflect the stock for a typical household of 2 to 4 people. The individual appliances shown would be used at most tens of minutes per day or even per week. In all these cases, the ratio of rental stock required to household stock, while satisfying the task demands the objects are used for, would exceed 10 to 1. For the appliances, it would be far greater. A 10 to 1 reduction in stocks required corresponds to a 10 to 1 reduction in objects that need to be produced, a 10 to 1 or better reduction in pollution from the corresponding production industries, and a 10 to 1 or better reduction in waste. That is on top of the elimination in packaging waste enabled by the local on-demand production and use of nets reusable boxes for all shipments. If the total purchase cost of all the clothing worn in a day averaged $100 today, and on average they had 500 wearings in their lifetime, the person would spend 20 cents per day, or about $70 per year, on clothing. An 80% cost reduction from the on-demand local production would put the annual clothing cost at $14. The annual cost for the dishes would be in the same range. Note that in all these cases, the household storage space for the items, when not in use, is no longer needed. For an appliance costing $100, able to perform 1,000 tasks in its lifetime, the cost each time it is rented would be 10 cents. If we assume the on-demand local production saved 80% relative to today, and the appliance cost $100 today, the cost per rental would be 2 cents. Or the person could spend 10 cents per use and rent an appliance that would cost $500 today. For complex objects, like the appliances, there is also the potential for rapid improvements in durability, production costs, and functionality. An appliance able to perform 1,000 tasks in its lifetime and used once a week would last 20 years. The same appliance rented 50 times a week would last just 20 weeks. During that period, design individuals or groups anywhere in the world could have improved on the design in any of those areas. That design would be what the production services would use to make the replacement. Durability and production cost improvements map directly into rental cost reductions via the CCRF model. Durability improvements lead to reduced stock demands up to the point where the usage rates are saturated. Finally, all of the household stocks indicated in these images could be put into the rental stock. That would eliminate the demand for any new production of the particular object type until all of those had worn out or become obsolete due to design improvements or style changes. That would put a corresponding hiatus on pollution emissions. Basis for change dispensing services fill the role of retail and warehouse businesses today. That role is to provide buffering when there is a separation in space or time or both between the productions of goods and their purchases. That applies to most household, capital, and consumable goods today. For basis for change, that separation does not exist for goods produced on demand from local production services. It does for the components or materials that are transformed and or assembled into those goods. The components include various forms of motors, bearings, gears, tubes, and wheels, as well as structural members for building construction. The materials include the bulk inputs to 3D printing, molding, or extrusion transformers, and the panels, blocks, or fabrics that are transformed by some form of cutting. Basis for change dispensing services provide the buffering to ensure local, on-demand access by the associated transforming or assembly services. There are big economies of scale advantages to producing such components and materials in bulk and often in locations remote from the production services. Food items cannot be produced on demand. They take time to grow or raise. However, most crops can, and in basis for change would, be produced locally as we specify in a separate video. Food items are perishable. The time available from harvesting to consumption is extended with refrigerated or frozen buffering. Historically, that was accomplished mostly by salting and pickling. Full meals can be produced on demand by services like restaurants. They can also be produced at locations separated in space or time from the demand. Buffering then requires preservation by refrigerating or freezing in appropriate meal-sized containers. Traditionally, canning or bottling can be used in place of refrigeration or freezing for bulk meals like soups as well as beverages. In a basis for change economy, bulk foods, meals, and beverages are shipped from producers through remote dispensaries to local dispensaries in reusable bulk containers with their own cooling if needed. Desired quantities are dispensed into appropriate reusable containers for delivery to customers. After being emptied, these are returned to the dispensary via a cleaning service. All basis for change dispensaries, local and remote, use machines that are stacks of the storage and access arrays shown in this chart. The green boxes are large, lidless boxes that contain shipping boxes containing individual items, small sets of items, or are bulk goods boxes. Individual boxes or bulk goods are extracted by the picker or putter device. All boxes move by gravity on the slightly sloped insertion, array, and extraction tracks. Clean, empty shipping boxes are put into empty spaces in a storage box. When a storage box contains only empty boxes, it is returned to the appropriate producers, possibly through remote dispensaries. Rental services use the same structure, but the returned shipping boxes contain the rental object. Those, rather than the empty shipping boxes, are returned to the array. The fully rebated CCRF for such an automated machine would be less than 1 cent. Clearly, the CCRF fee and rebate model requires a very fine-grained currency. Basis for change would have to maintain its own accounts for every person and a means to transfer amounts into and out of those accounts, like credit card payments today. Ensuring privacy with respect to such payments would be part of the NET's privacy model. Basis for change production services are largely just the stations found in traditional factories like those shown here. The primary difference with the factories is that an entire city forms the factory floor. Each station is a basis for change household owner-operated service. Nets moves the objects between each service for less than 1 cent. The object created consists of commodity components and object-specific structural elements that are fastened together in some way by an assembly service. The fastening elements like screws and glues are also commodities. The commodity components include various forms and dimensions of motors, bearings, gears, tubes, and wheels. The manufacture of the commodity components would mostly occur in the same kind of large automated factories in which they are produced today. The basis for change dispensing network and nets shipping would add less to get the components to the assembly service than cuts adds to get them to today's factories. The structural elements are produced in various ways by the same machines as would be used in the factories. However, each service would typically own just one. There are many types of such transforming machines today. 3D printing machines and laser cutters provide an ability to produce unique structures for every use. Those devices are on a rapid downward trajectory for their CCRFs, with decreases in cost and improvements in durability, accuracy, and input material options. Assembly in today's factories is often performed largely by robots like that shown here. Like the printers and cutters, many of these robots can produce a wide range of assemblies simply by changing the design specification they are provided with. A basis for change household owner-operated assembly service would typically own just one such machine and would be limited to the capabilities of that machine. But across the city, a robot capable of satisfying every need should be available. Recall from earlier that the demand for objects to be produced would typically be less than 10% of today's volumes. Further, the designs would be evolving rapidly due to the short calendar life of per-use rentals. The flexibility in structural element production and assembly both exploits and enables these characteristics. We have shown that a basis for change economy would transform the need for most businesses and the associated jobs into a competitive market for mostly household owner-operator, predominantly automated services, including per-use rental services. The number of objects needed and the costs per task provided by the services, or supported by the rental objects, would be substantially reduced. At the same time, the performance of the task would be improved relative to today. That would also come with means to not just address climate change, but greatly reduce pollutants of all forms. Do you want to live in a world where you need to work to live, or would you like to live in a world where you could retire before even entering the workforce? Or even then, your quality of life would be better than that of a well-to-do person today. Basis for Change provides a system for delivering the tasks needed to accomplish that, and producing the objects required to perform those tasks. The question is, are we willing to structure our society around an economic model based on corporate capitalism and a need to work to live, or do we recognize that there are better options and work to realize them?